Hey, good morning, Dr. Bob Flower. This is your Monday, March 11th, 2013 Achievement Forum. Okay, so we're going to be talking further about our discovery of the natural intelligences, of which we have discussed. There are 13. So far, we've talked about the planning intelligences, the three. Um, and today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and hopefully something that's important to you, and that's polarity or opposition. Now, I consider when I was looking for a concept or a system um, of understanding, uh, one of the things I recognized that had to be included within this whole package was opposition. I mean, after all, if you don't have opposition and a way to deal with it, it's just a useless exercise. It becomes just a question of power. One overcoming the other and putting it completely asunder, and that's not reality. That happens at times, but it's not something that's uh, indicative of true human nature. There's always polarity, even in nature. There's polarity. Beautiful sunsets and tsunamis. You know, gorgeous beaches and tornadoes. Okay, so the idea here is that we understand polarity as a part of our everyday reality and the way we do things and what we're confronted with every day. And if there's a way of dealing with polarity, it makes life a hell of a lot easier, and it makes our level of achievement um, escalate. Okay, so what I've discovered and what I've found is that polarity or opposition is actually our pathway to excellence. Okay, and what I mean by that is this: that when you run into opposition, and we go back to our planning intelligences, that means that what you're focusing on and what you believe about that is contrary to the position that's being presented to you. So whether it's husband and wife, or boyfriend and girlfriend, or boss and or two managers, in the company, or whatever it is. It's a matter of looking at the same thing in a different fashion. Okay, so how do we deal with that? How do we deal with you want to do things one way and your wife wants to do things another way? Okay, and it's perhaps a serious issue, a budget issue or something like that. Well, the thing to do is to look at both sides from one objective viewpoint. And I realize that that's not the easiest thing to do, but I can tell you this. When you do that, life becomes so much easier and simpler. You become companions, whether it's business, pleasure, social, and even governmental. You become companions in a search for something that works for both parties. Okay? And it's not this attack and grind and kill, and it becomes something of coming together, looking at the same thing from different viewpoints. So the idea is that perhaps instead of you convincing the other that your viewpoint is correct, or the other convincing you that their viewpoint is correct, perhaps it becomes a matter of both looking at the same thing through completely different scope. Okay, and that's what we're going to address there. We're going to do a lot on polarity and opposition. Next week I'm going to present to you something that we call personality orientations. Okay, different characteristics that we all have, and how they match up and how they conflict with what we do in our lives. But that's for next week. So today, and one of the examples I want to give you is something that I've worked on, a paper that I'm just finishing up, of the difference between ancient models and Judeo-Christian models. Okay, and the ancient models, and this is a classic example what I'm talking about how societies change and people change, or people have conflicts. Up until the time of the birth of Christ, the ancients approached issues as well as follows. There was a problem or an issue, they all gathered together and looked at that issue and discussed and debated that issue in the sense of, what do you feel about it? What do you feel about it? How do I consensus of opinion? And then what they did was, very intelligently, they tried to find a way of dealing with that issue, something that was going to be satisfactory to everyone. Now you're going to say, well, that's just negotiations. No, it's not just negotiations. It's a hell of a lot more than that, because what you're doing is expanding your mind. You're opening your perception of reality. And here's the difference between belief and perception. Belief is something that's concrete. Perception is something that's temporary. You look at it and you say, well, this is what I think. But, I might be subject to change. Belief is, it's mine. That's the way it is. So that's the basic difference between what these people did in ancient times. All right, and the Greeks were masters at this, as were the early the early Hebrews. They were terrific, and of course the Chinese philosophies are some of the best in the world. Okay, some of the best of time, and this is the approach that they took. Well, in came the Judeo-Christian model, and what that did was turn to concepts of control, concepts of belief, not perception. Right? Again, beliefs are usually not changeable. Perceptions are malleable. All right, you can change it without any big issue. And so that what happened was we became more concerned about individual feelings, subjectivity, being wrong, being outcast, being elite, being subservient. All of these different notions of of society that took over the mindset, so that people began to look at things not objectively but subjectively. They became instead of free thinkers, they became restricted believers, whether they liked it or not. And many of your religions, your certainly your Christian religion during the time of the Crusades and whatnot, the Muslim, the birth of Muslim was very, very aggressive. All right, where Christianity at the time was soft. You had the opposition arise, which was the birth of Islam, where it became very violent. Okay, so and that's what started to transition. And I'm not suggesting that there weren't wars and evil and whatnot prior to the CBE or the birth of Christ or whatnot, but things were different. The ancients looked at things totally differently. Fast forward to today, we have kind of come around the curve here. We're still at the point where we're looking at things with jaundiced eyes, very subjective, especially in the West. The West is notoriously poor at looking at things with a perspective, rather than with a belief. And what we need to do is we need to kind of get back into vogue with that notion of taking polarity or opposition into us and making it a part of how we live our everyday reality. How do we deal with things that we don't believe in, for instance, okay, where somebody else does? And how do we handle that? And there are many answers to that issue, but the basic question is, how do we deal with it so that both parties can adapt it? How can it be more objective, impartial, right? And that's the challenge. That's the way we elevate our achievement level. That's the way we develop our potential. Because the curious thing is this: potential is something that, in its very nature, something that has not yet been achieved. Okay, so that's where you have to go in order to achieve. That's where you have to go to master something. And I'll say this forever, that simply trying to overpower your opposition is fruitless, because it won't happen enough in one's life to make it a very valid experience, especially for the common person. I mean, now maybe if you're the President of the United States for 8 years, that's going to happen, and maybe for a few years after that or whatnot, but it's not going to happen all of your life, okay? So what we want is something that's going to work for us on a daily basis, something that's going to make us more effective, something that's going to make us feel better about ourselves and feel better about our environment, right? Which is, of course, sorely lacking today, because we all feel that we're on the wrong path, we're going the wrong way, our leaders are this, our corporations are that. And that may all be true, but until we get on the path together of trying to correct those mass concepts, those mass beliefs, things are not going to change. And it can, because today we're in a viral environment. Things can change like that, okay? So thank God for that, and I think it's the beginning. The year 2000 has ushered in a totally new genre. The internet, the social media. Okay, these are things that have the capacity to achieve what I'm telling you here, and to do away with that partial approach to the way we live our lives. All right. So, by the way, this paper will be going up on our website, www.drbobflower.com. Right, and these lessons will, of course, be put up there. And next week we're going to be talking again more about polarity. There's a lot to be discussed with polarity. There are a lot of issues. A lot of people have doubts, which I love. I just love the opposition. And we'll discuss that, and we'll meet that head on, and try and resolve issues. So time to time we're going to be doing some online seminars and whatnot, and I have a couple of very interesting professionals who will be joining me. That I think you're going to love that whole scenario. But in the meantime, think about the other side, what the other guy is looking at, how they're viewing it, and then look at your side, and then look and see where there might be a third way. And sometimes what happens is, in doing that, all of a sudden you realize that, hey, you were wrong, that the other guy was right.